The year is 2025. The world watches with bated breath as economic indicators flash warning signs. A perfect storm of geopolitical tensions, protectionist policies, and unforeseen global events have converged, threatening to plunge the global economy into chaos. The specter of inflation looms large, casting a long shadow over the future. Everyday families face an uncertain future. For years, economists and analysts have warned about the unsustainable path of global debt and the potential consequences of reckless monetary policies. Now those warnings are ringing true. The once reliable systems that underpin global trade and finance are showing cracks, threatening to shatter the fragile foundation upon which our prosperity rests. The average American family is already feeling the pinch. Prices for essential goods and services are rising steadily, eroding purchasing power and making it harder to make ends meet. The stock market, once a symbol of boundless growth, has become increasingly volatile, prone to sudden swings that leave investors feeling anxious and uncertain. This is not a time for complacency. This is a time for action. By understanding the forces at play and taking proactive steps to prepare, we can weather the coming storm and emerge stronger on the other side. The global economy is a complex and interconnected web of relationships, intricately woven over decades of cooperation and mutual benefit. For decades, this web has facilitated unprecedented growth and prosperity, allowing nations to specialize in the production of goods and services where they have a comparative advantage. This specialization has led to efficiencies and innovations that have propelled the global economy forward. However, this intricate system is built upon a foundation of trust, cooperation, and the free flow of goods and capital. Without these key elements, the entire structure becomes vulnerable to disruptions. Today, that foundation is crumbling. The cracks are becoming more visible as geopolitical tensions rise and economic policies shift towards nationalism. The rise of protectionist policies, characterized by tariffs and trade barriers, threatens to unravel the delicate fabric of global trade. These measures, while intended to shield domestic industries, often backfire by escalating trade wars. These policies, often implemented with the intention of protecting domestic industries, can have far-reaching and unintended consequences. Factories may shut down, and industries that once thrived on international cooperation may find themselves isolated and struggling. When one nation erects trade barriers, others are likely to retaliate, triggering a cascade effect that can disrupt supply chains, increase prices for consumers, and stifle economic growth. This domino effect can lead to a global economic slowdown, affecting every corner of the world. The smooth functioning of the global economy depends on the ability of nations to trade freely and fairly. International trade agreements and cooperation are essential to maintaining this balance. Protectionist policies undermine this principle, creating uncertainty, instability, and the potential for conflict. Markets react to these uncertainties, often with volatility that can have widespread repercussions. The consequences of this unraveling are already being felt around the world. Small businesses are closing and once thriving shopping districts are becoming ghost towns. Businesses, large and small, are grappling with rising input costs, disrupted supply chains, and reduced access to markets. The uncertainty makes it difficult for companies to plan for the future. Consumers are facing higher prices for everyday goods, from groceries and gasoline to electronics and clothing. The cost of living is rising, putting additional strain on household budgets. The global economy, once a beacon of progress and prosperity, is teetering on the brink. The path forward requires renewed commitment to cooperation, trust, and the principles of free trade to rebuild and strengthen the fragile foundation of global trade. Few economic policies are as short-sighted and ultimately self-defeating as tariffs. While often touted as a means of protecting domestic industries and jobs, tariffs are, in reality, a blunt instrument that inflicts collateral damage on consumers, businesses, and the overall economy. The recent escalation of tariff wars, particularly between the United States and its major trading partners, has sent shockwaves through the global economy. These tariffs, essentially taxes on imported goods, have driven up prices for businesses and consumers alike. American farmers, once reliant on export markets for their livelihoods, have found themselves caught in the crossfire. Retaliatory tariffs imposed by other nations have closed off vital markets, leaving farmers with surplus crops and mounting debts. The manufacturing sector, already struggling to compete in a globalized economy, has faced higher input costs and reduced demand, leading to job losses and factory closures. The true cost of tariffs is not measured solely in dollars and cents. Tariffs erode trust between nations, undermining the spirit of cooperation that is essential for a healthy global economy. They create uncertainty and instability, making it difficult for businesses to plan for the future and invest with confidence. And they ultimately harm the very people they are intended to protect by raising prices, stifling innovation, and reducing economic opportunity. Section 4. The inflationary spiral. When prices soar and savings crumble. Inflation, the insidious erosion of purchasing power, is a silent thief that robs individuals, families, and entire nations of their economic security. It creeps up slowly, often unnoticed at first, but its effects can be devastating over time. As prices for everyday goods and services rise, the value of money diminishes, making it harder for people to maintain their standard of living. When prices rise faster than wages, the value of our hard-earned money diminishes, making it harder to afford the things we need and want. This phenomenon affects everyone, but it hits low and middle-income families the hardest, as they spend a larger portion of their income on necessities like food, housing, and transportation. The current economic climate is ripe for an inflationary spiral. With the global economy still reeling from the effects of the pandemic, supply chain disruptions have become commonplace, leading to shortages and higher prices for many goods. Years of loose monetary policies coupled with supply chain disruptions and increased government spending have created an environment where too much money is chasing too few goods. This imbalance between supply and demand is pushing prices higher across the board, affecting everything from groceries to gasoline. This imbalance between supply and demand is pushing prices higher across the board. As a result, consumers are feeling the pinch in their wallets, and businesses are struggling to keep up with rising costs. For everyday Americans, the consequences of inflation are all too real. The cost of living is increasing at a pace that outstrips wage growth, leaving many families in a precarious financial situation. The cost of putting food on the table, keeping a roof over their heads, and filling their gas tanks has skyrocketed, straining household budgets and forcing families to make difficult choices. Many are cutting back on non-essential spending, delaying major purchases, and dipping into their savings just to make ends meet. Savings, once a source of comfort and security, are being eroded by inflation, losing value with each passing day. What was once a safety net for emergencies or future plans is now dwindling, leaving people feeling vulnerable and uncertain about their financial future. The elderly, living on fixed incomes, are particularly vulnerable to the ravages of inflation. Their pensions and retirement savings, once sufficient to cover their expenses, are no longer keeping pace with the rising cost of living. Their pensions and retirement savings, once sufficient to cover their expenses, are no longer keeping pace with the rising cost of living. They are forced to make impossible choices between essential goods and services, sacrificing their health and well-being in the process. They are forced to make impossible choices between essential goods and services, sacrificing their health and well-being in the process. The impact of inflation is far-reaching, affecting not just the present but also the future, as people struggle to save and invest for the long term. Section 5. The interest rate squeeze, a double-edged sword. Interest rates, the levers by which central banks attempt to control inflation and stimulate economic growth, are a double-edged sword. They are powerful tools that can influence the entire economy, but their effects can be unpredictable and far-reaching. When interest rates are low, borrowing becomes cheaper, encouraging businesses to invest and consumers to spend. This can lead to a vibrant economy with bustling markets and thriving businesses. However, low interest rates can also lead to inflation, as the increased money supply chases a limited supply of goods and services. Prices begin to rise, and the cost of living increases, putting pressure on households and businesses alike. In an attempt to tame the inflationary pressures gripping the global economy, central banks around the world are starting to raise interest rates. This is a delicate maneuver, as it involves balancing the need to control inflation without stifling economic growth. While higher interest rates can help to curb inflation by making it more expensive to borrow and spend, they also have the potential to slow economic growth. Businesses may find it harder to finance new projects, and consumers may cut back on spending. For businesses, higher interest rates mean that loans for expansion, equipment purchases, and other investments become more expensive. This can lead to a slowdown in business activities, affecting everything from hiring to production. This can lead to reduced investment, slower job creation, and a decline in economic activity. The ripple effects can be felt across the economy, from empty shopping malls to closed factory gates. Consumers, facing higher interest rates on mortgages, credit cards, and other loans, may cut back on spending, further dampening economic growth. The burden of higher interest payments can lead to financial stress and reduced disposable income. The challenge for central bankers is to find the delicate balance between taming inflation and supporting economic growth. They must carefully calibrate their policies to avoid tipping the economy into recession while keeping inflation in check. Raising interest rates too quickly or too aggressively could trigger a recession, while keeping rates too low for too long could allow inflation to spiral out of control. The stakes are high, and the decisions made by central banks will have long-lasting impacts. The global economy is navigating a treacherous path, and the stakes could not be higher. The actions of central banks will shape the economic landscape for years to come, influencing everything from job creation to the cost of living.